She laughed at me for dusting 3 times a day, said I was obsessed and needed a hobby. But my so-called obsession was the reason I discovered the truth, a truth that blew my family apart and rebuilt it stronger than ever. Because while dusting under her bed one morning, I found a pair of men's cufflinks that didn't belong to my son. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. I've always been a tidy person. Not in a crazy way, mind you, but I grew up in a time when we took pride in our homes. You could tell a lot about a woman by how her house smelled and whether her baseboards were clean. My late husband used to joke that you could eat off my floors, though I never let him try. After he passed, cleaning became comfort, something predictable when everything else felt upside down. When my son, Michael, married that woman, Stephanie, and invited me to move into their guest suite, I thought it was the kindest gesture. He said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone." I thought he meant it, but I'd learned later that kindness wasn't exactly Stephanie's strong suit. At first, I tried to stay out of their way. I cooked dinner twice a week, helped with laundry, and yes, kept the place spotless. Stephanie would roll her eyes when I vacuumed too often or polished the silver. "You know, Carol," she said one day, wine glass in hand, "you could just relax once in a while. It's not like the Queen's coming for tea." I smiled and said, "Well, dear, if she does, we'll be ready." That didn't go over well. She started making little comments behind my back. I could hear her whispering to Michael in the kitchen, "Your mom is obsessed. It's not normal." I brushed it off. I told myself she was just young. She didn't understand that some of us actually enjoy keeping things nice. But then the distance between Michael and me started to grow. He stopped coming down for breakfast, stopped asking how I was sleeping. When I'd knock on their door to bring them fresh towels, Stephanie would answer with that tight little smile and say, "We've got it, Carol. You don't need to do everything." Except one morning she was gone, said she was at yoga. Michael had left early for work, and I was alone in the house. I took the opportunity to clean their upstairs bedroom, not to snoop, mind you, but because I couldn't stand how dusty it was getting. I mean, honestly, who lets dust collect on their nightstands? That's when I saw them. A pair of silver cufflinks under the bed, gleaming in the morning light. Heavy, masculine, engraved with initials that definitely weren't my son's. JT. Michael's initials are MRH. I froze. My first thought was, maybe she bought them secondhand. My second thought, and the one that made my stomach twist, was that they belonged to another man. Still, I didn't jump to conclusions. I'd been around long enough to know that the truth always reveals itself, especially if you stay quiet and pay attention. So I slipped the cufflinks into a tissue, put them in my pocket, and went about my day as if nothing happened. That evening, I cooked lasagna, Michael's favorite, and watched how they acted around each other. Stephanie was glowing, all dolled up, even though they had nowhere to go. Michael, poor thing, looked exhausted. I waited until he went upstairs. Then I asked her, casual as could be, "Did someone leave these behind?" I held up the cufflinks. Her face drained of color. She stammered something about them being a gift for a friend. I smiled, nodded, and said, "That's nice, dear. You always were so thoughtful." But I saw the tremor in her hand when she picked up her wine glass. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart ached for my son, for the man he'd become, for the way he trusted her so blindly. I knew I couldn't just accuse her. She'd twist it around and make me look like the meddling mother. Ugh, I knew her type. Pretty, charming, always playing the victim. So I did what any obsessive woman would do. I started cleaning more. Not because the house needed it, but because it gave me a reason to be everywhere, to notice things. And it's amazing what you'd see when you're the one doing the laundry. One day, tucked into her pocket of her jeans, I found a hotel receipt from a place 2 towns over, a single night, paid in cash. The date, the same night she told Michael she was visiting her sister. I didn't say a word. Instead, I started a little journal, Dates, times, little observations. A habit from my years working as an office manager. You never accuse without documentation. But the universe has a funny way of rewarding patience. Because 2 weeks later, Stephanie made the mistake of mocking me again, right to my face, in front of Michael. "Your mom's at it again," she said, laughing, dusting like she's on an Olympic team. Michael chuckled awkwardly, but I caught the flicker of embarrassment in his eyes. He was tired of her disrespect, even if he didn't admit it yet. So I said, sweet as sugar, "Well, dear, you never know what you'll find when you tidy up. Some of us clean because we care. Others might be scared of what'll turn up." She blinked, smile faltering. "Oh, don't worry," I added, turning back to my dusting. "I'll make sure everything stays spotless." And that's when I knew she was nervous. She knew I knew something. What she didn't know was that I wasn't done uncovering the dirt yet. Because the next thing I found didn't just confirm her affair, it told me exactly who she was seeing. And just when she thought she had me backed into a corner, she forgot who she was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. A few days later, Michael went on a business trip. Stephanie stayed behind, claiming she wasn't feeling up to traveling. That's when I decided to test a little theory. I told her I'd be spending the weekend at my sister's house in Clearwater. She pretended to look relieved, said, "Oh, good, you deserve a break." But I didn't go anywhere. Instead, I parked my car a few blocks away and came back on foot that evening. I waited quietly in the dark, behind the hedge by the side door. My heart pounded like I was 20 again. At exactly 8:47 p.m., a black BMW pulled up the driveway. A man stepped out, tall, expensive suit, the kind of cologne that practically announces a midlife crisis. He rang the doorbell once. Stephanie opened it, and they kissed like two teenagers who thought no one could see them. Well, someone could. I didn't take pictures that night. Not yet. I needed a plan, something undeniable, something that couldn't be brushed off as jealousy or paranoia. So I bided my time. Every Sunday, they'd go to brunch together. I found the receipts. Same restaurant, same waiter, same initials, J.T. And one Sunday, while cleaning out the kitchen drawer, I found the business card, James Trent Real Estate Investments. A married man. And not just married, married to one of my bridge club friends. Oh, it was about to get interesting. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. When I realized the initials on those cufflinks matched the name on that business card, my stomach did a slow roll like a boat in choppy water. James Trent. I knew that name the way you know the jingle from a commercial you swore you'd never hum along to. He was the one with the glossy postcards in everyone's mailbox, the visionary who bought up bungalows, modernized them into matchstick boxes, and flipped them for eye-watering prices. He also happened to be married to my bridge partner, Elaine. We're not best friends, but we've shared enough lemon squares and whispered enough table talk to know that she's a good woman and that she's loved him a long time. I didn't want to be the bearer of that kind of news, but I believe sunlight is the best disinfectant, and you know how I feel about disinfectants. So I started with facts. I mapped out dates from my little journal, yoga nights, sister visits, those Sundays when Stephanie returned home smelling of hollandaise sauce instead of hotel perfume. I taped each receipt into a binder like a scrapbook from hell. I labeled sections receipts, photos, times, witnesses. The whole thing looked like I was planning a corporate audit. In a way, I was. I also checked the house cameras, the ones I asked Michael to install last year after the break-in 3 blocks over. One neat little angle covered the driveway. I didn't need to play detective.
The camera didn't care about anyone's feelings, just the facts. There he was, midweek, near sunset, that black BMW clicking into park, the driver's door opening, James's profile turning toward the house, tie loosened, the posture of a man who believes the world will politely look away.
I took screenshots, timestamps. I kept it all quiet. My next step wasn't to call Elaine, not yet. See, I've lived enough life to know that sharing a suspicion too soon can blow up in your face. The person you're trying to protect might forgive the cheater for the first sin and never forgive you for bringing it to light. I needed something that would stand up to a tearful denial and an Instagram-ready apology. So I set a little mousetrap. Nothing illegal or ugly, just informative. There's a brand of linen spray I use that has a very particular scent, a clean, crisp blend of cotton and vetiver. I've always loved it. It smells like good habits. I sprayed the guest towels, the ones I keep in the hall closet, with that scent. Then I put a tiny dot of clear nail polish on the tag of each towel, my quiet little watermark. The next time I cleaned, the set was gone. And 2 days later, I found one of those towels balled up in the laundry hamper of the upstairs bath, faint lipstick near the hem. The color was a coral I recognized, Stephanie's favorite summer lip. Funny how people change their hair and buy new shoes, but their shade stays the same year after year. I washed it, of course. I'm not a monster. But I took a photo first. Meanwhile, Stephanie kept up her performance. One night, she giggled at Michael across the dinner table and told him she'd sign them up for a couples wine club, as if their marriage were a Pinterest board. He smiled like a good man who wants to do right by his wife. I could have cried. After dinner, he helped me put the dishes away. Mom, I know you mean well, but maybe let Steph handle the upstairs. She feels like you don't trust her to keep house. Now that was rich. I closed the cabinet gently. Michael, I'll respect your wishes. You should know, though, that trust isn't something you dust off once a year. You maintain it. He kissed my forehead, half listening, already halfway back to his phone. Love you, Mom. There's a particular ache that only mothers know. The ache of watching your child head straight toward a cliff while you, with your sensible shoes and all your experience, stand there holding a bright orange warning sign that nobody wants to look at. I didn't call Elaine. Not yet. Instead, I ran into Stephanie in the hallway the next day and asked her about her yoga class. Hot yoga, she said, fanning herself. So cleansing. She winked at me over her water bottle. You'd like it, Carol. It's basically sweating out an attitude. I had to laugh. I prefer a mop, I said. That weekend, she hosted a small get-together at the house for her creative circle, a handful of perfectly curated friends with perfectly curated lives. I kept to the kitchen and handed out canapés like a quiet little waitress. One of the friends, the one with the giant hat that looked like it belonged at the Kentucky Derby and nowhere else, drifted in near the stove and said, Steph, did James RSVP? You know James never confirms, he just shows up. Men, am I right? She shot her a look that could slice a grapefruit. Then she tossed her hair and said too casually, No idea what you're talking about. But the room went very still for a heartbeat, and then her phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up with a preview bubble. Jay, see you at 8, use the side. She slapped the screen dark with the speed of guilt. It was all I could do not to whack her with a wooden spoon. Not yet, Carol. Keep stirring. I finally called Elaine the following Tuesday. I chose Tuesday because she's always in between obligations then. I told her I had something delicate to share, and could we meet at the church parking lot where the preschoolers shriek at the pigeons? Neutral territory. I arrived early and sat in my car, the binder heavy in my lap. Elaine got out of her SUV and walked toward me like a woman bracing for a medical diagnosis. Tell me it's not about James. Before I even opened my car door, I held out the binder. I wish I were wrong. We sat side by side, watching a little boy chase a bird with a sandwich in his hand.
Elaine flipped slowly through the photos, the receipts, the driveway snapshots. Her finger found the initials on the cufflinks. She made a sound, small and crumpled, and then she inhaled, wiped her eyes, and squared her shoulders. "Thank you," she said simply. "What do you want to do?"
"I want to protect my son," I said. "And you?" She pressed her lips together. "I want the truth, and I want him to feel it where it hurts most, his wallet and his reputation. That's his precious temple." That's when I knew we were going to be just fine. We made a plan, the kind that doesn't require breaking a single law. I'd continue documenting and keep my mouth shut at home. Elaine would contact a lawyer, not to file anything yet, but to know her options. She'd also quietly download the credit card statements that they shared for the business side of his flip projects. Publicly shaming a man like James doesn't change him, but touching the paperwork he worships, that gets his attention. I went home and made soup. I always think better while I simmer something. While the carrots softened and the house filled with the comfort of broth, I went through the household toolbox. Stephanie had been nagging Michael to finally let her handle bill pay because Carol's filing system looks like the Library of Congress, her exact words. He'd let her take over 2 months ago, which was convenient timing for someone who needed cash for midweek trysts. I checked our shared digital folder. She'd been paying everything on time, but she'd also added 3 new accounts: a boutique spa, a personal training package, and a monthly charge to a co-working space downtown. Stephanie works from home and has a perfectly good office upstairs. Interesting. I printed the summaries and slid them into my binder. I also made a second binder, slim, neat, with only the essentials, the kind of thing with a tired man with a bleeding heart could manage to absorb in one sitting without shutting down. I labeled it, in my nicest lettering, Spring Cleaning. A week later, my patience paid another dividend. I was folding towels in the upstairs bathroom when I heard voices outside the bedroom. Stephanie's chirpy, "Oh, you scared me," and a man's lowered rumble. I recognized the rumble. I kept folding. The air conditioner thumped on, and then came the quiet thud of the bedroom door. The old house tells truths when people think they're being careful. I didn't do anything dramatic. Instead, I put the towels on the shelf, walked downstairs, and stepped right out the front door as if I were fetching the mail. The camera over the garage watched me leave. 10 minutes later, I walked back in, singing under my breath so the microphone would pick it up, as if I'd never been elsewhere. Timestamps, you see. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. A few days after that, an opportunity fell into my lap like a coin in a fountain. The HOA, I know, everyone hates an HOA, but ours does throw a mean block party, announced a community yard sale to fund new playground equipment. Guess who volunteered to chair it? Stephanie, of course. She loves a spotlight. She told everyone the sale would be hosted right on our front lawn because our yard has the best light. I just raised an eyebrow. The more public, the better. Elaine and I adjusted our plan. Instead of a dramatic confrontation, we'd orchestrate a soft, undeniable reveal that made the liars talk themselves into a corner. I suggested we donate a few items, including a set of men's dress shirts that Michael had outgrown. Elaine added a box of old office tchotchkes, paperweights, pen sets, and a pair of silver cufflinks that she'd found in a drawer, James's duplicates. He has a weakness for shiny baubles like a crow. She wrote $10 on a sticker and placed it in the box with a joking note, "For the man who has everything." It was petty, yes, but I'm allowed to flourish. The day of the sale dawned bright and breezy. Stephanie wore white like innocence and bounced around greeting neighbors by name as if she'd grown up here.
I set out the folding tables with my binder tucked under a potholder in the kitchen and greeted anyone who came by with lemonade. Around 11 a.m., the black BMW rolled to a slow stop at our curb. James got out with his boyish grin clipped neatly onto his face like a tie bar, scanning for admiration. He found Stephanie, and for a half second, their eyes met, spark snap. They forgot the rest of us existed. Then the awareness of public eyes washed over them both, and they detached, all polite smiles. Elaine was already there, chatting with two neighbors about hydrangeas. When she saw him, she lifted her hand in a small wave, as if she were greeting a distant cousin. Classy. She walked over, calm, steady sleeves, not a hair out of place. She did not make a scene. She simply took his arm lightly and said, "James, I've been wanting to show you something. Come inside with me and Carol, won't you?"
He hesitated, then nodded, because men like James cannot resist the pull of a well-lit stage, even if the script isn't written for them. Stephanie drifted along behind them, curiosity baited like a fish. We stepped into the kitchen. I set the lemonade pitcher on the counter with more force than necessary. It thunked, satisfying, and pulled the potholder aside. I opened the slim binder, the one labeled Spring Cleaning, to the page with the driveway screenshots, another page with receipts aligned by date, and the towel photo, and the little timeline of yoga nights that coincided with BMW sightings. It wasn't even a minute before James puffed up like a toad. "What is this?" he said, trying on indignation as if it were a new blazer. "You spying on me?" I took a breath. Calm is a weapon, if you know how to use it. "That camera protects the house," I said. "It caught you protecting nothing." Elaine's voice was quiet, even. "We share a mortgage, James. I share some of your business debts. I'd prefer not to share you." Stephanie tried to scoff, but her face had gone pale under her foundation. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You know Carol's obsessed. She probably staged—" "The towel," I said gently. "With your lipstick shade sunset coral. I believe Sephora calls it a creamy satin finish. I wouldn't dare touch your things." James's jaw worked. He said, "This proves nothing. Neighbors come by. Friends." "Friends?" Elaine said, turning a page. "At 8:47 p.m., using the side door, every Wednesday you ask your assistant to hold calls because you're in a client consult." She slid a printed calendar across the counter, marked in her tidy pen. "Odd, because your assistant is my niece. She owes me a favor." For a moment, all you could hear was the ceiling fan. "I want you to know," I said, to both of them, and I meant it. I didn't want this. I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted your wife to be spared, but I won't clean around a mess that keeps spreading. Stephanie's chin jutted out. "Michael will never believe you," she said, and there it was, the hiss under the honey. "You think you're fragile." "Maybe," I said, "but fragile things cut deep when they break." Right then, the back door creaked and Michael stepped in from the garage, hair ruffled from the wind, brow furrowed at the unexpected gathering in his kitchen. "What's going on?" Stephanie pivoted toward him so fast she nearly knocked over the lemonade. "Baby, they're attacking me. Carol is—" "Mom," he said to me, I scanning my face, "is everything okay?" I picked up the binder. "No," I said, "but it's going to be." I handed it to him, the slim one, not the monster. "If you want the longer version, I have it. This is the essential." He opened it, shoulders rounding as he scanned, page by page. At the towel photo, his mouth tightened. At the driveway screenshots, his jaw went slack. At the little timeline I'd drawn, blue pen, dates, times, he rubbed his temple like a man trying to press the headache back inside. He looked up at Stephanie, and his expression did something I will never forget. It closed, not with anger, with knowledge. "It's the most devastating thing." He said, "Tell me the truth, for once." She opened and closed her mouth. It was only, we were just, she shifted into the performance I had seen a dozen times, the wet eyes, the breathy apology. I've just been so lonely, Michael. You're always working, and your mother, she's... Stop, he said, quietly, and to his credit, he didn't look at me when he said it. He held his gaze on her. Don't make this about my mother. James cleared his throat. This is not the place. This is exactly the place, Elaine said, voice sharp now. And since we're here, I want you to know I've consulted a lawyer. Not because I want half your empire. I don't want your half-finished kitchens or your mismatched tiles. I want out of your mess with my credit intact. She set a letter on the counter, a simple, polite request for a separation of business liabilities while they evaluate the marriage. No fireworks. Just the kind of document that makes a man like James start counting his blessings and his bank accounts in the same breath. He blustered, of course. He paced. He had the gall to say we were ganging up, but nothing he said erased the timestamps or the towel or the lipstick that wasn't mine or Elaine's. It took 3 minutes for the first neighbor to pretend to need more napkins and drift into the kitchen. Word spreads fast at a yard sale. I don't love gossip, but you can't stop a river with a broom. I stepped to the doorway and said, "We're fine, thanks," and smiled in the way that ends conversations. Then I turned back to my family, because that's what we still were, even in the rubble.
Michael closed the binder and set it down with care, the way you set down an old photograph of someone you used to know. "Okay," he said to Stephanie, "we're going to handle this like adults. You and I will talk privately. Then I'm calling a lawyer." He glanced at me. "Mom, I need you to promise me something. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post. Don't tell the neighbor. Don't tell the man who walks his schnauzer at midnight. Please, let me breathe." "I promise," I said. And I meant it, because the point was never humiliation. The point was truth. After the sale wrapped up and the folding tables were put away, the house sank into that strange, too quiet hush that happens after a party. Michael went to the guest room to call a friend, a lawyer he trusted. Stephanie stomped upstairs, and I could hear drawers sliding open and shut with purpose. When someone is cornered, they tidy in anger. It's a tell. Elaine hugged me at the door. "Whatever happens next," she said, "we did the right thing." We did. 2 days later, the next shoe fell. Michael came home early from work with a banker's box and a look that was half grief, half resolve. He set the box on the dining room table and said, "Mom, did you know she opened a line of credit in both our names? The mail was being forwarded to the co-working space." I took a breath. Not surprise. I'd suspected something was off, but sorrow. "I'm sorry, baby," I said. "We're going to fix it." He nodded, eyes glistening, and then he did something that broke my heart and made me proud in the same breath. He asked for my help. Not to take over, just to help. "I don't want to make a vindictive decision," he said. "I want to make a smart one." We sat at the table, the banker's box between us, and sorted. Old school. Piles, labels, sticky notes. I called it triage. He laughed for the first time in days and said, "Of course you have a name for it." We made a list of calls. The bank, the credit bureau, the lawyer. We ordered a credit freeze for him. Then, because I am who I am, I made dinner. Men make good choices on full stomachs. Later that night, Stephanie came home glossier than usual and asked if anyone had called for her. "I'm expecting a package," she said, sidestepping the box on the table so obviously I could have measured the angle with a protractor. When she went upstairs, my phone buzzed. A message from Elaine. "Check your email." Her lawyer had found something interesting while poking through public records on James's businesses. A quick lien filed against a property owned by a shell LLC, a familiar LLC, that had curiously paid a consulting fee to a brand new staging company owned by Stephanie. The amount wasn't huge, but it wasn't nothing.
It reeked of sloppy funneling. And if there's one thing sloppy people hate, it's a woman with a label maker. I didn't march upstairs and wave it around like a flag. I forwarded the email to Michael and to his lawyer and waited. I also printed the record and placed it in, yes, the big binder. I added a tab, Financials. The next morning, Michael put on a suit and told Stephanie they were going to have a financial check-in, budget, accounts, the whole thing, because we should be on the same page. She flirted, tried to pivot it into a date, and when that didn't work, she pouted. He stayed steady. They sat in the dining room while I took a long walk that circled back past the house every 20 minutes. At minute 40, Stephanie's voice pitched high enough to pierce the glass. "You have no right to go through my accounts." Michael said, calm as a pastor, "Joint accounts are joint. Your business is yours. So, let's see your business." Silence. When I finally came inside, very carefully not listening, he was alone at the table, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "He won't share the books," he said. Then he did something that surprised me. He smiled, small and sad. Her refusal is an answer. He emailed his lawyer. He asked for a post-nuptial agreement with a fidelity clause. Maybe a long shot, maybe a tactic, but not unreasonable given the circumstances. He also asked for a temporary separation of finances and for her to vacate the home while they reassessed. I didn't tell him this, but the two most powerful words in paperwork world are "for now." People fight forever. They comply with "for now." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out.
Stephanie didn't leave quietly. She tried every door on the carousel. Tears, apologies, blame, nostalgia, seduction, anger, pity. She accused me of planting those cufflinks. She said I'd always wanted to break us up. She told Michael that real families stick together and shut outsiders out. And the way she said outsiders made it clear she meant me. My son stood up for me. Not with fireworks, just with facts. "Mom didn't sleep with James," he said softly. "You did." For a week, the house was a theater of closed doors and careful footsteps. I cooked, I watered the plants, I took my walks, and I did something else. I made a call to a woman from church who runs the local women's shelter. Not because I thought we'd need it, but because I believe in being ready. I cleaned out the guest room and gathered a tote of essentials, toothbrush, shampoo, clean pajamas, and put it in the closet. Not for Stephanie, for my son. People don't talk about it, but men need a safe place too when their world goes sideways. 2 Thursdays later, a courier arrived with an envelope for Stephanie. She took it upstairs and then came back down with a face like chalk. "How dare you," she said to Michael, waving the paper. "How dare you humiliate me with legal paperwork?" He stood steady. "The paperwork is how we move forward." She packed a bag. She made a point of sweeping everything off her vanity into it, like she was filming a reality show, the clatter loud and petty. Then she took one long look at me and said, "You will die alone in this house with your bleach and your precious baseboards." I smiled. "We'll see." When the front door closed, the house let out a long breath. I made tea. Michael sat with his cup, both hands around it. "I keep trying to remember the first red flag," he said. "I think it was the day she told me the only thing you and I had in common was being too much." She laughed like it was a joke. He stared into his tea. I laughed too. "It's easier to laugh than to look," I said. "But you're looking now." That weekend, he moved into the guest room. I left a fresh towel, unscented, no nail polish, on the bed. The quiet felt different. Not empty, just honest. On Sunday morning, he asked if I wanted to go to church. We hadn't gone together in months. We sat in the third pew from the back, and I held his hand during the hymn. The sermon was about forgiveness, which felt like the universe playing a wry little joke. I whispered to him, "Forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation." He squeezed my hand.
When we came home, there was a car already in the driveway. Not the BMW, Elaine's SUV. She got out with a folder and a smile that reached further than it had in weeks. "Progress," she said, tapping the folder. "Turns out when men who build houses keep sloppy books, the houses of cards fall very quickly." She'd found that James had been misclassifying personal expenditures as business write-offs, gym memberships, weekends away, the kinds of things a good accountant should flag. Either the accountant was asleep at the wheel, or James had forgotten the first rule of lying: you need a better memory than an honest man. Her lawyer was drafting a polite letter to his partners that said in essence, "We're leaving the dance unless you fix the music. No threats, just leverage." "Thank you," I said, "for being brave." She grinned. "Right back at you." That night, with the dishwasher humming and the dog across the street barking at his own reflection, my son asked the question I'd been waiting to hear and dreading. "Mom, when did you know?" I told him the truth. The day I found the cufflinks, I suspected. The day I found the hotel receipt, I knew. The day I saw the BMW, I understood. He nodded. "I'm sorry you carried that." "I didn't carry it, I organized it." He laughed, really laughed, and the sound did me a world of good. We were not done. There was still accounts to untangle, stories to separate, reputations to reclaim. There was still the final knot to pull, the one you'll appreciate, the one that tightened around both their ankles at once like a drawstring bag. But that, my dear, comes next.
For the first time in months, the house felt honest. Not peaceful yet. Honesty is louder than peace, but at least it didn't squeak with lies when you walked across it. Michael had the guest room, I had my lists, Stephanie had her suitcase, and from what the neighborhood grapevine politely didn't say, a condo sublet with an impressive view and paper-thin walls. I wish I could tell you that was the end, but the thing about people like Stephanie and James is they don't walk away quietly. They leave glitter, problems that show up in every corner for months. You keep finding it under lamps and in your shoes. The first sparkle showed up on a Tuesday. Michael's phone pinged as we were sorting the mail. He glanced down and held it up for me to see. It was a Venmo request from Stephanie for $1,200, labeled Reimbursement Household Necessities. The little note had a heart and a sparkle emoji, the kind of thing that could make you think it was all harmless. "Necessities?" I said, eyebrows arched. "Did the grocery store start selling designer handbags in the produce aisle?" He sighed. "I'll forward to the lawyer." We kept triaging. We color-coded our lives. Green for accounts that were clean, yellow for needs a second look, red for call immediately. If you think that sounds a little much, remember, I was the woman accused of being obsessed with cleanliness. I decided to embrace the brand. I even printed little labels that said, "Spring Cleaning, Finance Edition," and stuck them to the file folders. It made Michael laugh, which was becoming my favorite sound again. In the middle of our paperwork boot camp, I got a call from Elaine. "Coffee?" she asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I have a new development, and you're going to savor it." We met at the bakery with the cinnamon rolls the size of steering wheels. She slid into the booth with a manila envelope and that tidy satisfaction you only see on women who've just aligned a dozen moving parts and made the clock chime right on the hour. She said, "My attorney had a friendly chat with the partners at Trent Urban Properties." She unfolded a letter and laid it flat on the table. "Turns out they've noticed James's creative accounting too. They were afraid to poke the beast, but with documentation, they perked up." I took a sip of coffee. And they want him to step back to focus on home matters while they do an internal audit, which is corporate for "you're benched, champ, and the trophy's going back in the case." She grinned. They're also quietly revising their vendor list. Guess whose staging company didn't pass a routine compliance check? I could have kissed her. "Bless you," I said, "and bless your lawyer." But Elaine wasn't done. She tapped the envelope. "There's more. That co-working space on Stephanie's monthly bill, it's above a boutique accounting office. Small, 2-person team.
Guess who rents the suite next door? She paused, savoring it like a good bite. The bookkeeper who did setup for Stephanie's LLC. The poor girl put her portfolio on LinkedIn. She's very proud of the invoicing system she created, complete with sample screens. She passed me a printout. The sample invoice template showed staging consultation on site, billed in 4-hour chunks to an entity with one of James's shell company names. It listed locations as client site, various, with a memo line that actually said hotel consult. I set down my coffee and rubbed my temples as if I could massage common sense into the situation. Brazen, I said. Sloppy, Elaine replied. Sloppy is better for us. We finished our rolls and split a second coffee like teenagers prolonging a good conversation. On my way home, I stopped at the office supply store. I bought a fresh binder, the good kind with the rounded spine so the pages don't catch. It felt like sharpening a sword. I labeled it Staging/LLC. That night, Michael and I had a new stack to sort through. He contacted his lawyer with the templates Elaine had found. The lawyer promised to subpoena records if necessary, but meanwhile, he suggested we contact the bank's fraud department about any charges that looked connected to shell entities. You'd be surprised how helpful a bank becomes when something smells like a fake invoice. Paperwork won't hug you, but it will hold you up.
I slept well for the first time since the yard sale. I dreamed of clean counters and open windows, and when I woke up, the world hadn't cracked in two. I made oatmeal. Michael came in with that banker's box and set it on the floor like a faithful dog. "Ready?" he asked. "Always." 2 days later, Stephanie spun the glitter again. She posted a soft-lit selfie from a patio that didn't belong to any friend I knew and captioned it, "New chapter, toxic-free, choosing me." Then she put up a story with a quote about escaping controlling elders. She didn't say my name, but she didn't need to. The implication floated like a bad smell. I was annoyed, not because of the gossip, but because she was stealing a word, toxic, from people who needed it. I turned off my phone. Michael's best friend, Garrett, a good man with a laugh that could startle birds, came by that afternoon. He hugged Michael and squeezed my shoulder and said, "Say the word and I'll help pack things." I laid out lemonade and the last of the snickerdoodles. Men eat cookies without asking permission. It's one of their nicer qualities. Garrett works in risk management. Funny how life hands you the right people at the right time if you keep your eyes open. He asked if he could see the timeline. I handed him the spring cleaning binder like a proud teacher with a star pupil's report. He read in silence. Then he said, "I know a forensic accountant who owes me a favor. She doesn't do divorce, but she does small business fraud all day long. If Stephanie ran money through an LLC and James wrote it off as a business expense, that shows 2 intent lines, hers to defraud you, his to defraud his partners or the IRS. He raised his hands. "I'm not saying criminal. I'm saying leverage." I didn't bother hiding my smile. Leverage is my love language. We set a Zoom for the next day. The accountant, a woman named Priya, who spoke in calm little clusters of facts, reviewed the template Elaine found, glanced over the statements we'd flagged, and asked 2 or 3 surgical questions. Who set up the LLC? Was it registered at home or at a virtual address? Did Stephanie file a business property tax affidavit with the city? She was doing the grown-up version of hunting for fingerprints with a good flashlight. She registered it at a virtual mail service. Michael flipped to a page and pointed. Suite number and all. Priya's eyebrows did a small climb. Good. Those services keep excellent logs. Subpoena later, if needed. She smiled at Michael in that professional, sympathetic way people do when they've seen 100 versions of the same storm. She said, "I know this feels like the opposite of romance, but paper is merciful. It cannot lie to you." When the call ended, I went to my craft cupboard and pulled out the label maker. I hesitated. Then I typed, "merciful paper," and stuck the label inside the binder cover where only I would see it.
We take our encouragements where we find them. The next week moved like a line dance. 2 steps forward, 1 step sideways, 1 step you didn't know was coming. Michael's lawyer sent a letter proposing a postnup with a clear no adultery, no dissipation of assets clause. Stephanie's attorney responded with the kind of email that smelled like expensive cologne and ego. A lot of flourishes, not much substance, and the words unfounded allegations sprinkled like confetti. Meanwhile, Elaine's letter to the partners did its quiet work. James was on personal leave, which he spun as noble on LinkedIn. Men like James are their own publicists. And then, I'll admit, this was almost artful, Stephanie tried a sympathy play so bold it belonged in a soap opera. She called Michael to say her mother was ill and could she borrow the SUV just for an afternoon to drive out and bring her home? Michael is a soft touch, but he's not a fool anymore. He asked for a doctor's note. She hung up on him. Fine. The line between soft and gullible is clarity. Since I was apparently still obsessed, I cleaned the garage. It needed it. While I was up on a step stool sorting the shelf with the old paint cans, always store them upside down, it seals the top, I spotted a small plastic tub tucked behind the holiday lights. Lid cracked, dust thick. I eased it down and wiped it with a rag. Inside, a tangle of cords, a dead router, and a flash drive in a plastic baggie. The baggie had a pink lipstick stamp on one side like it had been grabbed in a hurry. The flash drive was the color of guilt. Cheap, silver, anonymous.
Now, I am not Snoopy by nature, but I am thorough. And this was in my garage in a box that we paid to store. I took the flash drive inside, slid it into my old laptop, the one I keep offline for recipes and bus schedules and anything that doesn't need to talk to strangers, and waited. The drive held folders with names like before and after, staging looks, and inspo emojis. The first folder opened to a neat grid of room photos. Nothing shocking. Console tables with fake ferns, rugs rolled out straight, until I realized the timestamps on most of them were between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., and the background windows showed curtains that were not ours and not any client I recognized. The angle of the lamp, the generic headboard in 5 rooms, hotel. I clicked into the next folder, invoices, a dozen PDFs with the company name, the virtual address, and the memo lines, overnight design consult, after-hours staging, model suite spruce-up. Payees? 2 of James's shell LLCs, 1 legitimate partner LLC, and, this made my eyebrows climb, a short-lived LLC that I knew for a fact was dissolved last year. I didn't click any deeper. I took my hands off the keyboard the way you take your hands off a hot pan. Then I picked up my phone. Michael, I called, keeping my voice steady. I found something in the garage. Bring your lawyer's number. He was in the kitchen in under a minute. I showed him the folder names and the timestamps. He didn't touch the computer. He took a photo of the screen with the date visible in the corner. Then he called his attorney, who practically sprinted through the phone. Turn the laptop off, she said. We'll image the drive properly. Don't forward, don't copy, don't open another file. We did exactly what she said. It felt like holding a delicate insect without crushing it. The attorney arranged for a tech to make a forensic copy the next morning. In the meantime, I put the flash drive back in the baggie and set it in a Ziploc with a note. Found in garage, shelf, 2:15 p.m., Tuesday, Carol. Chain of custody. I've watched enough courtroom shows to respect a piece of evidence's journey. That night, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't replaying the discovery. I was thinking about what winning meant. In the movies, vengeance is a confetti cannon. In life, it's a spreadsheet that balances. I wanted my son free, not scorched. I wanted Elaine's credit intact, not just her pride. And if there had to be a little social consequence for the pair who treated other people's lives like props, well, I'm not made of stone. The forensic tech did his magic. 2 days later, Michael's lawyer called with a voice that hummed.
We found enough to prove the staging business was used for personal rendezvous billed as business services. That's leverage for your post-nup terms and for asset protection. And, she added, it's leverage for Elaine's side to push a fair separation of liabilities. Paper, merciful, again. We didn't need to blow the whistle to the IRS. Not yet, and maybe never. We needed Stephanie to stop trying to bleed my son dry, and we needed James's partners to hold his leash enough that he couldn't yank Elaine through the mud. While the adults played chess, Stephanie tried tic-tac-toe. She showed up with a care package for Michael, soup and a handwritten note on the top. We can fix this if your mother steps aside. I opened the lid, the chicken noodle looked fine, but I had already cooked for the week, and I didn't eat from kitchens that called me toxic. I set the container in the freezer, because I am practical if nothing else. Soup doesn't deserve to be punished for its label. Then came the smear. Her friend with the giant hat posted a story time online about older women who manipulate their sons for control with a winking emoji. I reminded myself of something my mother taught me. Reputation is what your neighbors say. Character is what you see when you brush your teeth. I brushed my teeth twice that day and felt just fine. Here's where the next turn came from the most unexpected place. The HOA newsletter. Remember I told you everyone hates an HOA until it installs something you like? Well, the board announced a Showcase of Homes charity tour. A handful of houses would open their doors to ticket holders to show off renovations done by local builders, proceeds to the new playground. Guess which builder had sponsored last year's tour and loved to be photographed on front porches with ribbon-cutting scissors? I called Elaine. I have an idea, I said, and I could hear her sit up straighter through the phone.
We didn't want to publicly humiliate anyone. We wanted clarity. So we chose one elegant turn of the screw. I volunteered our house, I know, for the tour, as is, with our pretty kitchen and my tidy pantry, because people love a pantry. I made it clear in my application that the house had been improved by a small local contractor last year, the kind of guy who returns calls and uses his spirit level. I also mentioned that we'd be hosting a sustainability corner with tips on reducing waste during renovations. That meant the charity's PR person scheduled a media walkthrough 2 weeks in advance to take some publicity photos. You see where this is going. On the morning of the walkthrough, I set a small display on the dining table. A binder, not the big one, I'm not a barbarian, a few sample before and after shots from magazines to show how you can reuse instead of buy new, and a tasteful little placard that read, "Honest work, honest books." My friend from church who runs the women's shelter dropped off pamphlets for their organization. It wasn't a trap, it was a mirror. At 10 sharp, the PR woman arrived with a photographer and the HOA president in tow. They gushed over the pantry, it is a good pantry, snapped photos of the sunlight in the living room, and asked if we had any partner builders to shout out. Of course, I said, and named our small contractor. Then I said, lightly, we also value vendors who follow compliance rules. There's been so much news lately about shell companies and fraud in real estate. It's a good reminder for homeowners to check credentials. I smiled at the camera, grandmother pleasant. Look for licensing, insurance, and clean books. The HOA president, who knows exactly everything about exactly everyone, gave me a look that said he heard every unsaid word. The PR woman jotted notes like she'd found a quote worth gold. The photographer asked me to hold the "Honest Work, Honest Books" placard near the pantry. Who was I to refuse? We didn't name names. We didn't need to. The charity published a blog post the next day titled, "Build Beautiful, Build Right," with a little pull quote, "Paperwork is part of the design." It went modestly local viral. In our town, viral means Susan in the garden club shares it and then it shows up in a Facebook group next to a lost cat. But let me tell you, the people who needed to see it
Saw it. One of James's partners sits on the HOA finance committee. He sent Elaine a text. "We need to talk. Today." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. While that simmered, Michael had his first mediation meeting with Stephanie and the lawyers. He asked me not to come, and I respected that. He wore his good navy suit, the one with the forgiving shoulders, and took the slim, spring-cleaning binder. When he came back, his face was set in a way I recognized, the look of a boy who just did the right thing, even though it hurt. "She wants half the house," he said, setting his keys in the bowl by the door like he was anchoring himself. I poured lemonade, because in this house, we solve problems with citrus and documentation. "What did your lawyer say?" "She said we'd counter with a buyout of her equity based on a fresh appraisal, minus her share of the new debt she put us in, plus a holdback until the LLC issue is resolved. No spousal support due to documented adultery and dissipation, and a mutual non-disparagement clause." "Good," I said. Then, because old habits die hard, I asked, "Did you eat?" He smiled, tired. "I did. Sandwich at noon. You trained me." We waited. Days stretched like taffy. In the quiet, I kept house. I polished the silver Stephanie said no one cared about. I cleaned the baseboards she mocked. I dusted the bedroom she hadn't slept in for weeks. And I thought about justice. Not revenge with fireworks. Justice like a well-made bed. Smooth. No crumbs. Then the email came. Stephanie's attorney, very suddenly, was open to terms. There was a catch, of course. She wanted to keep her staging company independent and off-limits. Michael's attorney replied with 6 bullet points and a smiley tone that wasn't actually a smile. Disclose financials, confirm no commingling with joint funds, indemnify Michael from any liability related to invoices issued to Trent entities, and agree to a retroactive marital reimbursement for the fraudulent household necessities. In short, you can keep your glitter if you sweep it up yourself.
While Michael's lawyer and Stephanie's lawyer negotiated over commas, Elaine's quiet leverage landed. James's partners presented him with a choice: step down formally and repay certain questionable distributions, or face an internal report to the board and external auditors. They also, bless their cold little business hearts, informed him that any further contracting with vendors who failed compliance checks would be grounds for immediate termination for cause. For cause is corporate for you leave without the golden parachute and maybe without pants. Elaine called me breathless and laughing in that slightly disbelieving way you laugh when the universe shows up with a tray of cupcakes after you've been eating your vegetables for months. "He's furious," she said, "which means it's working." We agreed on our next move, a joint, dull, tidy announcement. She would file for a legal separation with a mutual respect statement. Michael would file for divorce with the same tone. No fireworks, no gotchas, just paperwork with handrails. The non-disparagement clause meant Stephanie couldn't keep throwing glitter online without spitting it back in her own face. I'll tell you the truth. I cried a little the night Michael signed, in the kitchen, under the good light. Not because I wanted the marriage to survive, I didn't, but because I remembered the day he brought her home the first time, so nervous and proud, and I remembered the way she'd said, "I'm obsessed," and how I laughed like it didn't sting. We were almost there. The last knot was the staging company's paper trail, and it came loose in a way that made me believe in karma with good shoes. The forensic image of the flash drive contained a folder called Press. Inside were drafts of a pitch Stephanie had been sending to local lifestyle magazines.
How I Turned My Passion into a Profitable Staging Business in 6 Months. The draft included a client spotlight with photos, faces blurred, and a list of favorite late-night hotels for inspiration. I pressed my lips together so hard I could have sharpened a pencil on them. But tucked in the back of that folder was a Word document with a perfectly harmless name, inventory.xlsx notes. Someone had exported a spreadsheet to a document when they couldn't open Excel. The text preview listed item codes, pickup locations, return times, and, bless the sloppy glitter of it all, hotel room numbers with dates. Priya, the forensic accountant, nearly whistled through the phone. "That's not just leverage," she said. "That's a map." Michael's attorney sent one final, very specific request: indemnity from any claim by any Trent entity related to invoices tied to those dates and room numbers, and a signed affidavit that Michael had no knowledge of the staging business's after-hours work. Stephanie's lawyer agreed within 24 hours. I suspect there was a firm squabble behind the scenes. Sometimes even expensive men don't like representing someone who can't keep her folders clean. We were getting ready to sign when Stephanie tried one last spin. She appeared at the house unannounced with a bouquet of peonies, my favorite, which rankled, and a trembling chin. "She made a mistake," she said to Michael in the foyer. "We can come back from this. Your mother can move in with her sister. I can—" He shook his head, gentle. "We are past peonies," he said. "Sign the papers." She turned her eyes on me, soft, like a cat. "You got what you wanted, Carol." I met her gaze. "I want a clean house," I said. And then, because sometimes the universe likes a theatrical moment, James's wife pulled into our driveway. Elaine stepped out in her navy sheath dress and her sensible heels, carrying a folder and a calm smile that said, "We're done flinching." She handed Stephanie a sealed envelope. "From counsel," she said, "in case you're tempted to invoice our family again." Then she turned to me and squeezed my hand. "Almost there," she murmured. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. The next morning, papers were signed. Michael kept the house, refinancing to buy out her share net of her little debt confetti. She kept the staging company, along with full responsibility for any invoices connected to those hotel nights and for any tax implications. She agreed to the non-disparagement clause and to vacate in 7 days. 7 days. I can do a lot in 7 days.
I cleaned. I cleaned like a woman restoring a small cathedral. I washed the curtains. I touched up the baseboards. I pulled the refrigerator out and claimed the dust bunny colony on the back coils like a victorious explorer. I scrubbed the place where worry lives, that corner of the backsplash where tomato sauce splatters when you forget to put the lid on the pot. And when I was done, I put fresh flowers on the table. Not peonies, daisies. Honest, cheerful, cheap. On the 7th day, Stephanie came for the rest of her things. She brought a friend, the one with the hat. They boxed shoes and coats and 8,000 skincare bottles that promised youth and delivered debt. She walked room to room like a tourist who already seen the postcard and was disappointed by reality. When she got to the front door, she turned and opened her mouth. I held up a hand. "No speeches," I said. "We're practicing non-disparagement." She smirked. "You think you won." I smiled back. "I think we cleaned." She left. The door closed. The house didn't just exhale, it smiled. That night, Michael and I ate spaghetti in the quiet. He twirled his fork like he did when he was 13 and too tall for his chair. "Thank you," he said finally, "for being obsessed." I raised my glass. "To merciful paper," I said. He clinked his water to my wine. "To clean houses." We weren't quite done. There was one more thing, something I needed to do, not for revenge, but for symmetry.
I called Stephanie's mother. We'd never been close. She answered on the second ring. I introduced myself and said plainly, I wanted you to hear this from me, not the street. Papers are signed. Michael will be okay. I hope Stephanie will be too if she decides to be honest with herself. There was a silence on the line and then a quiet, thank you. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is tell the truth without adjectives. 2 weeks later, the HOA Showcase of Homes tour rolled through. Our pantry did not disappoint. People peered, asked questions, and took photos of my decanted beans like they were celebrities. I held the Honest Work, Honest Books placard with a grin and explained how to read a contractor's license number. The HOA president whispered, "This was a good idea." And I whispered back, "Clean houses sell tickets." A woman I didn't know lingered at the dining table and touched the corner of the placard. "My sister is leaving a man who lied with paper," she said softly. "Thank you for this." I squeezed her hand. "You're not alone." When the last guest left and the sun shifted to that late afternoon honey, Michael leaned in the doorway and watched me wipe down the table. "Should we do something now?" he asked, "to mark the end of it?" I nodded. I had just the thing. I went to the bedroom that used to be theirs, opened the drawer in the nightstand, and took out the tissue-wrapped cufflinks I'd found months ago. I brought them to the kitchen, unwrapped them, and set them on the counter. They looked smaller now. "Frame them?" Michael joked, eyebrows up. I shook my head. "Donate." We took them to the charity shop where people go when they want to turn mistakes into something useful. The woman at the counter lifted them to the light and smiled. "These will go quickly." "Good," I said. "They belong to a man who will appreciate them." We walked back to the car in the kind of silence that feels like a quilt. On the drive home, Michael said, "I didn't even know what cufflinks cost." "Neither did I said, "but I know what a clean conscience is worth." I wish I could tell you that was the final bow, but there's one last twist. Not violent, not cruel, just neat. The universe loves neat. It came wrapped in a manila envelope delivered to our porch 3 days after the tour. No return address. Inside was a letter on Trent Urban Properties letterhead. It wasn't for us, not exactly. It was a copy, CC concerned parties, of a resolution. Effective immediately, James Trent resigns his position as managing partner. The reason was corporate. The subtext was printed between the lines in big friendly letters. Attached was a boilerplate statement committing to enhanced vendor compliance. Someone had slipped me a souvenir. I read it twice and put it in a page protector, because that's who I am. That night, Elaine texted a single word, "Done." And with that, the last glitter vacuumed up. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because the resolution of James's exit triggered something I didn't anticipate, a clause in one of his partner agreements that obligated him to buy out a silent partner. He didn't have the cash. He had to sell the BMW. Petty? Maybe. But sometimes justice looks like a dent in a driveway that isn't yours anymore.
As for Stephanie, the last I heard, she pivoted her staging company into content creation. She's very good at soft lighting. I hope, sincerely, that she gets good at something else, too, living within her means and telling the truth. It's lighter than carrying scripts. We were nearly at the end. There was just one final reveal to share. Not about courtrooms or contracts, but about a secret I kept out of respect for timing. It's the piece that will make you look at the whole story differently. Not everything, but something important. And the look on Stephanie's face when she realized it, worth every dusted baseboard in this house. The papers were signed, the house was quiet, and for the first time in a long while, I could hear the soft clock over the mantel without a chorus of excuses drowning it out. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was relief, the kind that sinks into your bones like a warm bath after you've been standing on cold tile for hours. We had done the adult thing the adult way. Documented, deliberate,
dull on purpose, no fireworks, just forms. But I told you there was one last thing, a secret I kept out of respect for timing. It isn't about courtrooms or contracts, not exactly. It's about the moment you stop apologizing for seeing clearly. It happened the week after the signatures dried. I was in the pantry lining the shelves with fresh contact paper, lemons because life is on the nose like that, when Michael called down the hall. "Mom, can you come in here for a second?" He was at the dining room table with a neatly stacked packet and 2 pale pink peonies in a tumbler. "For you," he said, a little sheepish. "I know they're her flower, but they're yours now." "Flowers don't betray anyone," I said, and put them in the window. "What's that?" I nodded at the packet. He ran his palm over the cover. He said, "I think it's time you told her. I want you to have the satisfaction." "Tell who what?" I asked. Even though a little bell inside me chimed, I knew exactly what he meant. "Stephanie," he said softly, "about the prenup." I took a breath and sat down. See, when they got engaged 6 years ago, I did what every mother of a modern son should do if she can stomach the initial pushback. I insisted on a prenup. Not because I didn't like her back then. I did, or at least I liked the version she presented. But love doesn't pay lawsuits, and romance doesn't keep the roof from leaking. I offered to pay for 2 lawyers, his and hers, so no one could say she was pressured. My one condition was simple and fair on both sides. If either party committed adultery or dissipated marital assets, spousal support would be off the table and any division of property would account for the loss. The rest of it was downright boring. Inheritances remain separate, retirement accounts share growth from marriage forward, any business interests get a valuation method everyone agreed on when they were still smiling. Stephanie signed it, cheerfully. Her attorney, a woman with sensible shoes and a talent for plain English, explained every clause. We celebrated with lemon bars. And then we put the document away, the way you put away a smoke detector battery. You hope you never need it, but you sleep better because it's there. When things started going sideways months ago, I didn't bring it up. Not to you, not to Elaine, not to Michael, not at first. Partly because I didn't want anyone to think the goal was punishment instead of protection. Partly because timing matters, and a prenup thrown down too early looks like a gauntlet. We didn't need a fight, we needed a path. But now, with everything else settled, with the glitter vacuumed up, with the cufflinks gone to charity, and the kitchen scrubbed to a shine, it was time. "Are you sure?" I asked Michael. "I'm perfectly happy to let your lawyer handle it." He smiled. "You earned this." So I did what I do best. I made it neat. I put the executive summary on top, 2 pages, bullet points, page numbers, no legalese. Then the notarized prenup with both our signatures and the attorney's acknowledgments. Then the addendum we'd quietly added 2 years in, after she asked to stop working for a while. It spelled out how we'd handle finances during any stretches of unequal income. Her attorney drafted that one, fair is fair. I slid everything into a slim white binder, the kind a person can't help but hold with 2 hands, and labeled the spine in my best script, housekeeping. Stephanie agreed to meet in the living room at 6 p.m. 15 minutes, she said on the phone, voice cool. "I have dinner plans."
16 would be just fine, I said, and set the good clock back on the mantel so it would tick where it always had. She arrived 2 minutes late and didn't sit. She stood near the door like she had one foot in escape. Her perfume was different, greener, less sweet, and I wondered if rebranding your heart starts in the mirror. Michael stayed in the kitchen within earshot, clinking dishes he'd already washed. I set the white binder on the coffee table and folded my hands. "This won't take long," I said. "I wanted to close the loop. We've reached an agreement, and you've kept your company. This is not a reprimand. This is housekeeping." She gave a little scoff. "Of course it is." I opened the binder to the summary. "When you married my son, you and he entered into a prenuptial agreement. You had your own attorney.
I paid for her because I believe in people having their own advocates. This is not a trap. It's a seatbelt. You signed it on the 14th of June. Pages 8 through 12 cover adultery and dissipation. Page 9 gives a true-up calculation for property division and spousal support if those occur. She went paler than the peonies. A prenup, she said, like the word tasted like metal. Michael! He stepped into the archway, steady. We both signed it. You joked that it made you feel like a celebrity. We ate lemon bars. She stared at him and then at me, and for the first time since the yard sale, the mask slipped just enough to show the surprise underneath. Not anger, not grief. Surprise that the grown-ups were in the room and had been the whole time. This is petty, she said, trying to put the mask back on. You're dragging up ancient paperwork. Honey, I said gently, paper isn't ancient, it's current the day it's needed. She flipped through the summary, eyes skimming, and made the mistake of turning to page 9. The clean little table with cells that said things like, if adultery confirmed, spousal support equals $0, and dissipated funds offset against claim. She shut the binder like it had hissed. My lawyer will advise you the same, I said softly, because she made sure it would hold. That's why I paid her. It had to be fair, to be durable. There are parts that protect you too. If my son had broken those vows, you would have been the one reading this with a calmer heart. She looked at Michael again, a dozen wheels turning behind her eyes. He kept his voice gentle. I'm not gloating, he said. I'm grateful. This means we can be done. There it was, the difference that mattered. Not revenge, release. She left without another word. The door clicked softly the way it does when a draft moves through a house built with right angles. Michael leaned his shoulder against the archway and let out a breath that deflated months of holding. I couldn't remember if we'd told her, he admitted, rueful. I guess that says something. It says you're human, I said, and that sometimes the universe gives your mother impeccable timing. We didn't tell anyone else. Not Elaine, not Garrett, not even Priya, who would have appreciated the footnote. It wasn't a trophy. It was a smoke detector battery doing its quiet job. But I promised you the look on Stephanie's face would be worth the wait. And it was. Not because she hurt, because she finally understood. We hadn't been improvising. We'd been prepared. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Life began to fold back into itself, not the old shape, but a more honest one. I set the table for 2. I let the phone ring sometimes and didn't apologize. I said yes to things that used to feel like extras, and no to things that used to feel like obligations. The women's shelter asked if I'd come speak on a Tuesday about paperwork and boundaries, and I said, I'm very good at both. Elaine and I started walking twice a week, early before the heat turned the sidewalks into skillets. She told me about a class she'd signed up for. Not pottery, not painting, but bookkeeping for small nonprofits. She said, I like columns. They add up. Men are more complicated. We laughed like teenagers and stopped for iced coffee on the way back, like we were breaking rules.
Word drifted through town that James was consulting now, which is corporate for looking for the next thing. He'd sold the BMW and was driving something sensible with a cloth seat that didn't mind if he sweated on it. He'd survived, as most men like him do, but the shine had dulled. People answered his emails slower. The camera found new faces for the scissors at the porch rail photos. And more importantly, Elaine's credit, that invisible backbone the world sits on, stood straight and steady. Michael took a few extra cases at work and brought home a plant for the living room, a ridiculous fiddle-leaf fig that looked like it needed constant affirmation. He named it Judge, watered it weekly, and told it we were entering a growth phase. I bought it a nicer pot. We make a good team.
The HOA sent out its thank you email after the showcase of homes and included a photo of me in the pantry holding that little placard that said, "Honest work, honest books." Someone had added a caption, "Carol's commandments." I snorted so hard I had to sit down. The 4 commandments they'd pulled from my little talk were simple and frankly obvious. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. If it's on paper, respect it. If it's messy, it's usually hiding something. Clean first, then decide. I printed the photo and stuck it to the inside of the pantry door with a magnet shaped like a lemon. Not because I needed to look at myself, because I needed the reminder. Order isn't just about baseboards. It's about making room for your life to breathe. A month later, I went to Clearwater to see my sister, for real this time. We sat on her lanai with our feet up and a pitcher of iced tea sweating rings into the table. And I told her the whole thing, from cufflinks to peonies. She listened like the sister who sat with me in the dark when the babies were colicky and told me someday I would sleep again. She said, "You were always the careful one." Careful is a superpower. On the drive back, I stopped at the outlet mall. Not to buy anything, to use the restroom, stretch my legs, and watch families argue in the food court about pretzels. Life is beautifully ordinary if you let it be. I bought a bag of cheddar corn and ate too much of it in the car. My late husband would have laughed. I never let him eat in the car. People fall in love for reasons that look silly in hindsight and stay in love for reasons that look holy. When I got home, there was a small package on the porch addressed to me with careful handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a thank you note from one of the women who'd come through on the home tour, the one whose sister was leaving a man who lied with paper. There was also a tiny sterling silver charm shaped like a feather duster. "For your keychain," the note said. "Obsessed women save lives." I cried in the kitchen holding a keychain, which is ridiculous and exactly like me. I won't pretend every day is easy. There are nights Michael stands at the sink longer than the dishes require, and you can hear the gears in his head turning. There are mornings when I still expect to hear 2 sets of footsteps on the stairs. Some losses echo. But my son sleeps, he eats, he laughs, he teases me about my labels and asks for my grocery list when he goes to the store. We have our rhythm back. It has a new beat, a little syncopation where the pain sits, but it's music again. As for Stephanie, I meant what I told her mother. I hope she's okay someday. Not in my house, not in my wallet, but in her own skin. Maybe she'll keep chasing soft lighting, or maybe she'll get good at spreadsheets. Maybe she'll look back and realize that mocking other women is the laziest kind of sentence. I know this much. You can't outrun the truth in high heels. It catches you quietly when you're not looking and taps you on the shoulder with a small, insistent finger. I still dust 3 times a day in the spring when the pollen settles like yellow confetti. I still polish the silver, even though we only use it on holidays. I still tuck a clean towel over the edge of the tub, like a hotel maid for a guest who lives here all year. Obsession? Maybe. But here's the thing all the girls in big hats on the internet never post. The life you clean is the life you get to live in. And because you know I like the tidy bows as much as I do, here are the last little threads. The charity shop sent a postcard. The cufflinks sold for $40 and the story attached to them. A reminder to keep your hands where your promises are. Earned a smile from the woman behind the counter. $40 bought a backpack for a child starting school next fall. I put that postcard on my fridge like it was a PhD.
Elaine joined the board of a small housing nonprofit. She rolls her eyes at the meetings and comes home energized anyway. She planted hydrangeas, and they did not die. Garrett married his longtime girlfriend in a backyard ceremony with folding chairs and a sheet cake. Michael gave a toast that made 3 people cry, in a good way. The HOA playground went in under budget. I cut the ribbon, no one asked, I just had scissors, and pretended I was inaugurating a better world. The slide is fast. The kids laugh like church bells. On a bright Saturday, Judge, the plant, dropped a leaf. I swept it up, misted the soil, and told him, nobody's perfect. Michael laughed from the couch and told me I was veering into plant codependency. I told him if he ever stashes a flash drive in the garage again, I'll start labeling his socks with return addresses. We're okay. Better than okay. We are clean. Not perfect, not painless, just clean. And clean is a lovely place to start again. I'll leave you with this. I used to think justice would feel like a brass band marching down Main Street. Turns out, it sounds like a house at peace at 10 p.m. The fridge humming, the clock ticking, the pages of a book turning in a chair someone loves. That's the music I wanted. That's what I got. And I earned it the old-fashioned way, with merciful paper, clear eyes, and a feather duster. Now, I'll ask you what I always ask the women at the shelter when they finish their story and fold their hands around a cup of tea like it's a lighthouse. What would you have done in my place? And if you're still here, if you've walked this whole road with me, thank you. If you're ready for more stories of women who won't apologize for being thorough, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is.
Your watch to the end. Be click here. You will hear another story from my grandma.